She sat at the depot for hours, clutching her child, watching every wagon and rider pass her by. No one came. Not a soul claimed her, until the widowed sheriff stepped forward, offering not just a room, but a reason to stay. In the dust-covered town of Clearwater, people went about their lives as though shadows weren't creeping at the edges. It was a place where secrets hid in silence, where nobody asked too many questions, and where strangers were often left to fend for themselves. That's when she appeared. No one even knew her name at first. A thin young woman, barely grown, with a torn shawl wrapped tightly around her shoulders. She'd been left at the depot with nothing but a small bag and a pair of frightened eyes that darted to every sound. For hours, she sat there on the wooden bench, waiting for someone to come. The trains came and went, wagons rattled past, but nobody ever stepped forward. By evening, townsfolk began to whisper. Who was she? Why was she here? And most of all, why did no one claim her? Sheriff Elias Ward noticed from the steps of his office. He wasn't a man who wasted words. Grief had carved deep lines into his face. And since his wife had passed the year before, he had lived mostly in silence, keeping himself busy with law work and tending to his young son, Adam. He told himself it wasn't his business, but something in the way the girl's shoulders shook as she tried to stay invisible made it impossible to walk away. As lanterns flickered across Main Street, Sheriff Ward crossed the dusty road and stopped in front of her. "You waiting on somebody?" he asked. She shook her head quickly. "No, sir." Her voice was soft, careful, like she'd learned not to speak too loudly. "You got a place to go?" Again, she shook her head. That's when he noticed she wasn't clutching just her bag. Her arms were wrapped protectively around a bundle, a small child, no more than 2 years old, asleep against her chest. The sheriff exhaled slowly. A widow himself, he knew the weight of loneliness. He also knew what it meant to be responsible for someone small and defenseless. "Come on," he said after a pause. "No one should be left sitting out here in the cold." She hesitated, clutching her baby tighter, as though afraid it might be a trick. But something in his steady eyes told her it was safe. She rose and followed him step by step into the sheriff's quarters at the back of his office. That night, he gave her his late wife's old quilt and a room with 4 walls and a lock she could turn herself. She didn't say much, just whispered a thank you. By morning, Adam, the sheriff's little boy, had found her in the kitchen. Wide-eyed, he stared at the toddler in her lap. "Does she like biscuits?" he asked, pointing to the baby girl. For the first time, the stranger smiled. "She loves them." It was a small thing. But Sheriff Ward noticed it. The way his son laughed. The way the young woman's smile softened the gloom that had hung in his house for months. Her name was Clara. She had been left behind, abandoned by kin who had no room for her and no patience for a child. She didn't tell the whole story at first. But little by little, trust grew. The sheriff didn't pry, but the town did. Whispers spread fast in Clearwater. Some said she was trouble. Others claimed she had run from something darker. And soon enough, the truth began to follow her. One night, a rider came through, rough, mean, the kind who left silence in his wake. He asked questions about a girl with a child, said she belonged to him. Sheriff Ward didn't answer, didn't even twitch. "This town ain't got room for men who think people are property," he said, hand resting on his revolver. The man spat, muttered threats, and rode on. But everyone in town knew. He'd be back. In the quiet that followed, Clara sat by the fire, clutching her little girl. "You shouldn't have done that," she whispered to the sheriff. "He won't stop. He never does." The sheriff's jaw tightened. "Then he'll learn Clearwater ain't the place for him." For the first time in years, Elias Ward wasn't just keeping order. He was protecting something he didn't even know he needed. A reason to open his door, to keep the fire burning, to believe life wasn't over just because grief had visited him once. Clara stayed. At first only for the night, then the week, then longer. She helped around the home, tended to Adam when the sheriff was out, and for the first time in a long while, laughter returned to the sheriff's kitchen. But shadows don't vanish easily. And when the outlaw came back, demanding Clara and her child, The sheriff knew the choice he made would change not just his life, but the lives of everyone he now held close. That night, when the town gathered in fear, they saw something they'd never forget. The widowed sheriff, standing in the glow of the lanterns, Clara behind him with her child, and his boy gripping his hand. "No one came to claim her," Sheriff Ward said, voice steady as stone. "So I will," the outlaw sneered. But when his hand reached for his gun, he found the entire town had stepped forward. Men, women, even those who'd once whispered. Clara had found not just one protector, but a community. The outlaw turned and rode off into the night, and Clara wept. Not from fear this time, but from the overwhelming truth that for the first time in her life, she was wanted. In that small sheriff's home, where grief had lingered too long, a new family was born. Not by blood, but by choice. And from that day on, Clearwater was never the same. The outlaw didn't disappear as easily as the town hoped. Word carried fast across the desert that he had sworn to return, and men like him rarely broke their word. Sheriff Ward knew it, and so did Clara. For weeks, a heavy stillness settled over Clearwater. Folks looked over their shoulders more often. The saloon emptied earlier each night. Even Adam asked his father in a whisper, "Is he coming back?" Sheriff Ward would rest his hand on his boy's shoulder and say only, "If he does, he won't find us afraid." Clara tried to keep busy, helping in the kitchen, mending clothes, teaching little Adam's hands to rock her baby's cradle. But fear clung to her. Every knock on the door made her tense. Every rider's shadow stretched too long in her mind. One night, as the wind rattled the shutters, Clara finally told the sheriff the truth she had been holding back. Her name hadn't always been Clara. She had changed it to hide. The man who claimed her, he wasn't kin nor husband. He was a trafficker of the desperate, a man who bought and sold broken souls under the guise of guardianship. When her parents died, she was taken in by him, told she owed him everything. For years, she had endured his cruelty until the day she found courage to run, with her baby in her arms. Her voice broke as she spoke. "I thought, if I made it far enough, if no one knew my real name, maybe she could grow up free." The sheriff listened in silence, his jaw tight, hands clasped in front of him. When she finished, he said only, "Then running ends here. You're not alone anymore." For Clara, those words were heavier than iron, because for the first time in her life, someone meant them. But the outlaw's return came sooner than expected. It was a Sunday morning when hooves thundered through town. A half-dozen riders with rifles strapped to their saddles pulled up on Main Street. Their leader dismounted, his eyes cold and certain. "Send her out, Sheriff," he called, loud enough for every soul in Clearwater to hear. "You know she belongs to me." Elias Ward stepped out, revolver at his hip, badge gleaming in the sun. "No," he said simply. The outlaw sneered. "Then your town burns." A hush fell. Folks peeked from windows, hands trembling. Clara clutched her daughter inside the sheriff's quarters, whispering prayers she hadn't spoken in years. And then, something happened no one expected. One by one, townspeople emerged. The blacksmith with hammer still in hand. The preacher, clutching his worn Bible. Mothers, fathers, ranch hands, merchants, people who had once whispered doubts about Clara now stood beside their sheriff. The outlaw's smirk faltered. He hadn't expected resistance, certainly not unity. Sheriff Ward's voice cut across the street, steady as stone. "Clearwater don't belong to fear. You want her, you'll have to go through all of us." For a long, dangerous moment, it seemed blood would spill. But the outlaw's men shifted uneasily. They hadn't come for a war. They'd come for an easy prize. And with the weight of a whole town against them, they realized the prize wasn't worth the price. The leader cursed, spat in the dirt, and mounted up. "This ain't over, Sheriff," he growled. But when they rode off, everyone knew the truth. It was over. Clara stepped outside, her knees weak, tears streaming freely. She looked at the sheriff, at Adam, at the people who had risked themselves for her. For once, she wasn't just running. She was rooted. That evening, as lanterns lit the sheriff's home, Clara laid her baby down to sleep and whispered to Elias, "I don't know how to thank you." He shook his head. You don't owe me thanks. Just stay. That's enough. Her heart ached at the word. Stay. A word she had never been given before. And so she did. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. She became part of Clearwater, not as the girl no one came to claim, but as the woman the sheriff and his boy welcomed as family. It wasn't long before Adam began calling her Ma without thinking. And though grief still lingered in Sheriff Ward's heart, it began to share space with something else. Hope. Because sometimes family isn't who you're born to. Sometimes it's who stands up for you when the world turns its back. And for Clara, the sheriff's home wasn't just shelter anymore. It was a place to belong, a place to heal, a reason to stay.